The morning sun had barely risen when the familiar rumble of Sam Turner's tractor filled the air. It was old, a little rusty in places, but it was as reliable as the man who drove it. For decades, Sam had worked this land, rising before dawn, feeding his cattle, and plowing the soil that had belonged to his family long before the suburban development crept in next door. To Sam, the tractor wasn't just a machine, it was the backbone of his farm, the lifeline that kept his fields producing, his animals fed, and his family sustained. To the children in the neighborhood, it was even more than that. They loved to wave when Sam drove by, sometimes begging for a slow ride down the dirt road while their parents took photos. But to Karen Whitfield, the HOA president, it was an eyesore. That morning, Sam was tightening a bolt on the tractor's wheel when he heard the sharp click-click of heels on gravel. He looked up to see Karen marching toward him, clipboard tucked under her arm like a weapon. Her lips were pressed thin, and her oversized sunglasses reflected the green metal beast sitting in Sam's driveway. "Mr. Turner," she said curtly, "this tractor violates HOA community standards. It cannot remain visible in the driveway. You'll need to remove it immediately." Sam pushed his hat back on his head, wiped his hands on a rag, and stood tall. His voice was calm, but carried the weight of someone who had no patience for nonsense. "Ma'am, this here's a farm. That tractor plows the fields, hauls hay, and feeds my cows. It's not a lawn ornament. It's my livelihood." Karen sniffed. "Be that as it may, the rules are clear. No heavy machinery is permitted in residential areas. The sight of it is disruptive." She flipped open her clipboard, reading with relish. Section 4, Paragraph 12, no unsightly vehicles, including farm equipment, shall be parked in driveways or visible from the street. Sam crossed his arms. "Funny thing, ma'am. This land isn't part of your subdivision. Been zoned agricultural since before you built those fancy houses. Which means your little handbook don't apply here." Karen bristled, her cheeks reddening. "You may think that, but the HOA has standards, and we will enforce them. If you refuse, you'll leave me no choice but to escalate." Sam leaned against the tractor, his expression unshaken. "You do what you think you gotta do, and I'll do what I know I gotta do. This machine stays." Karen stared at him for a long moment, seething. Finally, she snapped her clipboard shut with a loud crack. "We'll see about that." As she stomped back toward the pristine row of houses, Sam climbed onto the tractor seat. The engine roared to life, a deep, steady growl that seemed to echo his words. He tipped his hat toward the retreating figure. "Good luck, ma'am," he muttered to himself. "You're picking a fight you won't win." And with that, he drove the tractor slowly toward his fields, the tires chewing into the earth, the sound rolling across the neighborhood like a warning bell. The battle lines had been drawn. The first letter arrived on a Thursday. Sam found it tucked between the electric bill and a seed catalog, the HOA's logo stamped at the top like an official seal of doom. Notice of non-compliance. Tractor in driveway in violation of community standards. Fine. $100. Immediate removal required. Sam read it once, then set it on the kitchen table with a grunt. His wife, Grace, looked up from her coffee. "Another bill?" "Worse," Sam muttered. He slid the letter across to her. "A piece of paper from people who think they own more than they do." Grace frowned as she read it. "Sam, this isn't just a warning. They're fining us." Sam shrugged, picking up his hat. $100 won't scare me. I've spent more than that fixing a flat tire on this thing." He nodded toward the tractor parked proudly outside the window, gleaming in the morning sun. But the HOA wasn't finished. The second letter came the following week. The fine had doubled, $250. Then another, $500. Each letter carried the same sharp language, the same threats of further legal action. Grace wrung her hands as the pile of envelopes grew higher on the table. "Sam, they're not letting up. You can't just ignore them forever." Sam leaned back in his chair, his face lined with years of sun and work. "I've faced droughts, floods, and blizzards. A stack of paper won't break me." Still, the pressure mounted. One morning, Sam stepped out to find three HOA board members in pressed polo shirts standing at the edge of his driveway, snapping photos of the tractor like it was a crime scene. "The morning, gentlemen," Sam said, voice low and steady. "You want a picture? Make sure you get my good side, too." They avoided his eyes, mumbling something about documentation, before scurrying back toward the neighborhood. But the boldest move came a week later. Karen herself arrived in a black SUV, towing behind it a flatbed truck. A man in coveralls climbed out, eyeing the tractor as though he'd been ordered to haul it away. Karen marched forward, clipboard in hand. "Mr. Turner, this has gone on long enough. The HOA has authorized removal. This tractor is leaving today." Sam planted himself squarely in front of the machine, boots dug into the gravel. His voice carried the weight of iron. "This tractor don't move an inch without me in the driver's seat. You think you've got authority here? You don't. This is farmland. And on this farm, I call the shots." The tow truck driver hesitated, glancing nervously between Karen and Sam. Finally, he muttered, "Sorry, lady. I'm not getting in the middle of this," and climbed back into his truck. Karen's face twisted in fury. "You can't win, Mr. Turner. The HOA always wins." Sam tipped his hat, his eyes steady. "Then you've picked the wrong farmer to tangle with." As she stormed off, neighbors peeked out from behind their curtains. Some whispered in disapproval, but others couldn't help but smile. Sam Turner had just stood down the HOA president and her tow truck in his own driveway. But the war was only beginning. The monthly HOA meeting was supposed to be routine. Budget reports, landscaping updates, the usual dull chatter. But this time, the room was packed. Folding chairs lined the walls, neighbors clustered in groups, voices buzzing with anticipation. Everyone knew why they were there. At the front stood Karen Whitfield, her pearl necklace gleaming under the fluorescent lights, clipboard in hand like a gavel. Behind her sat the other board members, stiff and silent. Karen cleared her throat. "Let's get right to it. As you all know, Mr. Turner continues to keep his tractor in plain sight, directly violating HOA rules. This cannot continue. We must enforce the standards of this community." A few murmurs of agreement rose from the crowd. Mrs. Langley, a woman who prided herself on her rose garden, raised her hand. "She's right. That thing is hideous. Every time I drive past, I feel like I'm in a barnyard. This is a neighborhood, not a farm." Karen nodded sharply. "Exactly. It's about appearances. Property values depend on uniformity and order." But then a deep voice called out from the back. "With all due respect, that tractor has been here longer than any of us." Heads turned. It was Mr. Green, one of the older residents, leaning heavily on his cane. "I've lived here 30 years. Sam Turner's been farming that land since before this subdivision was built. That tractor plowed the fields that grew half the food in this county. You think a machine like that is an eyesore? I think it's a symbol." The room erupted in mixed shouts, some agreeing, others shaking their heads. Karen slammed her clipboard on the podium. "This isn't about history, Mr. Green. This is about order, about standards. If we allow one man to break the rules, what's next? Rusted pickup trucks? Junkyards? We must set an example." Another voice piped up. Elena Martinez, a young mother of two. "My kids love that tractor. They wave to Sam every morning. Last fall, he let them ride on it during the harvest." "You call it ugly? My children call it magic." Applause rippled through part of the crowd. Others muttered angrily. The division was clear, half the neighbors nodding with Karen, half standing with Sam. Finally, Sam himself stood. He hadn't planned to speak, but the tension in the room demanded it. He removed his hat, holding it in his hands as he looked around the room. "I'm not here to pick fights," he began. "I'm here to farm. That tractor out there, it's not a toy. It's not a decoration. It's how I feed my cattle, plow my land, and keep this farm running. This farm was here before the HOA, before the houses, before half of you moved in. And I'll be damned if anyone tells me I can't use the tools my family's used for generations." A hush fell over the room. Sam's voice was calm, but there was steel in it, the kind forged by decades of hard work and hard battles. Karen's face tightened. "You think you're above the rules, Mr. Turner?" Sam met her glare. "No, ma'am. I think your rules stop at my fence line." The room exploded, shouts, clapping jeers. The board banged the table, demanding order. But there was no hiding it now. The neighborhood was divided, and the tractor had become more than a machine. It was a battle line. Karen Whitfield was not the type to back down. The shouting match at the HOA meeting only hardened her resolve. In her mind, Sam Turner's tractor wasn't just a violation of community standards, it was a personal challenge, and she never lost. The very next week, a White County vehicle pulled up to the Turner farm. Out stepped a man in a reflective vest, clipboard in hand. "Morning," he said flatly. "We've had complaints filed about a potential safety hazard on your property." The tractor Sam wiped his hands on a rag, squinting in the sunlight. "Hazard? That tractor's safer than half the cars your inspectors drive." The man walked around the machine, jotting notes. "We'll need to verify noise levels, emissions, and potential risk to neighboring properties." Grace came out onto the porch, her voice sharp. "This is harassment. We know who sent you." The inspector didn't deny it. He simply shrugged, muttering, "Just doing my job," before snapping photos. By the end of the week, Sam received a notice from the county. Pending review of alleged code violations. It didn't stop there. Stop. One morning, Sam found a bright orange sticker plastered on the hood of the tractor. "Vehicle marked for removal. Unsafe for residential area." Sam tore it off, crumpling it in his fist. His jaw clenched, but his eyes burned with quiet fire. That evening, Grace confronted him at the dinner table. "Sam, they're not just sending letters anymore. They're trying to strip this farm piece by piece. What are we going to do?" Sam leaned back, folding his calloused hands. "What we've always done. We fight back with the truth." And fight back he did. He marched into the county courthouse the next morning, boots echoing on the marble floor. At his side was a young lawyer named Rachel Porter, fresh out of law school but sharp as a tack. Together they dug through zoning ordinances, property deeds, and agricultural statutes. What they found was pure gold. Sam's property, unlike the cookie-cutter houses across the road, was zoned agricultural. That meant the HOA's bylaws had no authority beyond their own boundaries. His land wasn't theirs to govern. His tractor, his tools, his way of life, all protected by law. When Rachel showed him the highlighted passage in the county codebook, Sam let out a low whistle. "Well, I'll be damned. They've been barking up the wrong tree all along." Rachel grinned. "Not just barking, overstepping. With the harassment and fines, we've got a strong case against them." That night, Sam sat on his porch under the fading glow of the sunset. The tractor loomed in the driveway, orange sticker gone, its green paint catching the last rays of light. He tapped the brim of his hat and muttered, "They wanted a fight. Now they've got one." Across the street, Karen watched from her picture-perfect porch, seething as Sam leaned comfortably against the machine she so despised. She scribbled furiously on her clipboard, already planning her next move. But what she didn't know was that the game had changed. For the first time, Sam Turner wasn't just defending his tractor. He was preparing to turn the tables. The courthouse was packed. Word had spread that the tractor case had finally reached trial, and folks from all over the county crowded into the wooden benches. Farmers in boots sat alongside suburban neighbors in pressed shirts, all waiting to see whether a farmer's way of life could be outlawed by an HOA's clipboard. Karen Whitfield swept in like she owned the place. Her pearl necklace glimmered under the lights, and her lawyer, a tall man with slick hair and a smug grin, carried a thick binder stuffed with HOA bylaws. Karen's lips curled into a satisfied smile when she saw reporters in the back row. This was her stage. Then came Sam Turner. He wore his only suit, dark, a little worn at the edges. But he stood tall, his shoulders broad, his face weathered by years of sun and labor. At his side was his wife Grace and their young lawyer, Rachel Porter, carrying nothing but a slim folder and a quiet confidence. Sam tipped his hat politely to the judge before sitting. "All rise," the bailiff announced as Judge Parker entered. The room fell silent. Karen's lawyer was first to speak. His voice rang with false authority. "Your Honor, this case is about standards. The HOA has clear binding rules to preserve property values and community peace." Mr. Turner's tractor is an unsightly, noisy, industrial machine that disrupts this order. We have documented complaints, photographs, and citations. The rules apply to everyone, and he is no exception. Karen smirked, nodding along with every word. Rachel rose next, her voice steady. Your Honor, this case is not about order. It's about overreach. Mr. Turner's property is not governed by the HOA. It is zoned agricultural. The bylaws they've waved around stop at their subdivision. They cannot dictate what a farmer keeps on his land, and they certainly cannot ban a man's livelihood. Gasps rippled through the gallery. Judge Parker leaned forward. Do you have proof of this zoning claim? Rachel smiled faintly and placed a document on the bench. Yes, Your Honor. County records clearly state that the Turner farm has been zoned agricultural since 1952. That designation remains in effect. The judge skimmed the document, nodding slowly. Karen's lawyer scoffed. That may be true, but the tractor is still disruptive. The noise, the smell. Sam suddenly rose, his voice booming across the courtroom. With all due respect, Judge, that tractor isn't a toy. It plows my fields. It hauls feed for my cattle. It keeps this farm alive. You take it away. You take away my means to survive. That tractor's not disrupting the community. It's feeding it. He reached into his folder and laid down photographs. The tractor pulling plows through golden fields, children riding on its fenders during harvest festivals, baskets of food that ended up at the very farmer's market many of Karen's neighbors enjoyed every Saturday. Rachel added sharply, and let us not forget, Your Honor, the HOA has issued unlawful fines, attempted to tow Mr. Turner's property without authority, and engaged in harassment. This is not about noise. This is about power. And today, they've overstepped. Karen jumped to her feet, shouting, This is outrageous! That man thinks he's above the rules. Judge Parker banged his gavel. Crack. Mrs. Whitfield, sit down, or I'll hold you in contempt. Karen froze, her face red, and slowly lowered herself back into her seat. The courtroom buzzed with murmurs. Neighbors who had once whispered complaints were now shaking their heads, realizing the depth of the HOA's arrogance. Farmers in the back row muttered, That's right, and stand your ground. Judge Parker looked over the evidence again, his expression unreadable. Finally, he spoke. This court will deliver its ruling tomorrow morning. The gavel slammed once more. Crack. The case was adjourned. But as Sam walked out with Grace and Rachel at his side, he felt lighter. The truth had been laid bare. He could see it in the judge's eyes. Things were turning. For the first time since this began, the tractor's engine wasn't the only thing roaring. Justice was waking up. The courthouse was silent the next morning. Even the air felt heavy, as though it knew the weight of the decision about to fall. The benches were filled again. Neighbors, reporters, farmers, even curious townsfolk who had never attended a hearing before. Karen sat at the plaintiff's table, her pearl necklace tight against her throat, her lips pursed in a thin line. She avoided looking at Sam, but her leg bounced under the table, betraying her nerves. Beside her, her lawyer shuffled papers that no longer seemed useful. Across the aisle, Sam Turner sat steady, his calloused hands folded on the table. Grace sat close, her hand resting on his arm, while Rachel Porter, calm as ever, whispered, Just breathe. We gave him the truth. That's all we needed. The bailiff called out, All rise. Judge Parker entered, robes flowing, his face as unreadable as stone. He settled into his chair, adjusted his glasses, and tapped the gavel once. Crack. This court has reviewed the evidence presented, he began, his voice carrying through the silent room. On one side, we have complaints about noise, appearance, and inconvenience. On the other, we have binding agricultural zoning laws, documented proof of property rights, and testimony of this tractor's essential role in farming operations. He paused, scanning the room. Karen sat taller, trying to mask her nerves. Sam remained still, his eyes fixed on the judge. The law is clear. The HOA's authority ends at the boundary of its subdivision. It does not extend to Mr. Turner's farmland. Their fines are unlawful. Their attempts at removal are harassment. Gasps spread through the room. Grace squeezed Sam's arm tighter. Judge Parker's tone sharpened. Therefore, this court rules in favor of Mr. Turner. All fines levied by the HOA are null and void. The HOA is hereby ordered to cease interference with Mr. Turner's farming operations and to reimburse his legal costs. This tractor stays. The gavel came down with a resounding bang. The courtroom erupted. Farmers in the back row clapped and whistled. Neighbors cheered, some shaking Sam's hand as he rose. Even those who had once sided with Karen sat stunned, their certainty shattered. Grace turned to Sam, tears in her eyes. "You did it. You really did it." Sam allowed himself a small, quiet smile. "No," he said, "we did it. This land, this way of life, it's ours. Always has been." Meanwhile, Karen shot to her feet, her face scarlet. "This isn't fair. That tractor ruins the neighborhood. He's... Judge Parker's gavel slammed again. "Mrs. Whitfield, sit down, or I will hold you in contempt of court." Karen froze, humiliated, before collapsing back into her chair. Her lawyer avoided her gaze, already packing his briefcase in silence. Sam tipped his hat respectfully to the judge before walking out of the courtroom, Grace and Rachel by his side. Reporters surged forward, shouting questions, but Sam just said one thing as he passed: "Some things are worth standing your ground for." And with that, he stepped into the sunlight, leaving Karen and her clipboard empire in ruins behind him. The week after the verdict, the Turner farm looked different. Not because Sam had changed anything. His tractor still rumbled at dawn, his fields still rolled golden under the sun, but because of how people looked at it now. Neighbors who once sneered at the sight of the tractor now waved when it passed. Children ran to the edge of the road, cheering as Sam gave them a friendly honk of the horn. Grace laughed one evening when she found a thank you note taped to their mailbox. "Thank you for standing up for what's right. Our kids love that tractor ride every fall." Karen, however, had vanished from sight. She no longer strutted the streets with her clipboard. Her allies on the board avoided mentioning her name, embarrassed by the storm she had stirred. The neighborhood had grown tired of her crusade, and the court had silenced it for good. Sam didn't gloat. That wasn't his way. Instead, he chose to share what had been defended. On the following Saturday, he invited families from the neighborhood out to the farm. The kids climbed onto hay bales stacked high on the trailer, their laughter echoing across the fields. Sam's old tractor led the way, pulling the wagon slowly down the dirt path lined with tall corn stalks. Parents snapped pictures, smiling as the sun dipped low and painted the world in warm gold. At the end of the ride, Sam hopped off the tractor, his hat tilted back, and addressed the gathered crowd. "You all know what we went through these last few months. They tried to take away more than a machine. They tried to take away our way of life. But this tractor isn't just mine. It's part of this land, part of this community. And as long as I've got breath in my body, it'll keep on running." Applause broke out, genuine and loud. Some of the very neighbors who once whispered complaints were clapping hardest. Grace stepped up beside him, her eyes shining. "They wanted to make this tractor a symbol of division," she said softly. "But instead, it's become a symbol of unity." The crowd agreed. Children ran up, tugging at Sam's sleeves, begging for one more ride. He chuckled, climbing back into the seat, the engine roaring to life once again. As the tractor rolled forward under the wide blue sky, Sam looked out across his land. The fields, the farmhouse, the laughter of children, it was all still his. The HOA had tried to break him, but all they'd done was prove what he already knew. Some roots run deeper than rules. Some fights are worth the sweat. And sometimes, the old ways still win. The tractor gleamed in the evening sun, steady and strong. No longer an eyesore, but a legend.